means of making so many things, ranging from dust to colour, different types of food, plants, etc. The list goes on. It's my allergies and stuff that can't be controlled. Yeah, no problem. Have a look. Okay. I take it out.
Okay, yeah, okay. Can I just say the meeting is being live streamed for those who are joining us virtually. Thank you.
Okay, some of the UV light. Great start. Is it not colour you like or?
I can hear people who are on there virtually, just to let you know. Thank you.
Makes sense. Yeah. Have a look. It looks like a 25 size. Look at the size of the box. So it's brand new, which is great. Beautiful. We call it the Mauve Sylvester.
Yes, since it's Councillor Hamidi, I can just hear your background sound, just so you know. And I think it's being live streamed right now. So just so you just say thank you.
I don't think it's mine.
Apologies, Councillor. So we were just trying to work out where that is. So just so it's causing any problems. Thank you. Okay, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to our fourth and final meeting for our scrutiny panel on Regrow, Rewild and Recycle. I promised you I'd be able to say that by the end of the year, and I think I got there in the end. So, yeah, so I think just to start off, are there any apologies? No apologies. That's good to know that we're all here. I've got a couple of people who are joining us virtually tonight. So I've got Councillor Hamidi and Councillor Konzar. So there are no urgent matters as far as I'm aware of, and there are no matters to be considered in private. I don't know if there are any declarations of interest for this particular meeting this time. Okay, not them. Okay, so in that case, we'll go on to the minutes of the meeting and just see if we all agree the minutes from last time. I think it's a few months ago now, but it's from January. So page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, and finally page 13. I think we're okay. That's great. Thank you. Okay, so right. 14, is it 14 pages? Oh, okay, so maybe I miscounted as I went along, sorry, but okay. All right, yes. I think does it include page 3 on the agenda? Okay, yes. Okay, I think we're anyway, yes. I think we're okay, but yes, hopefully we'll be fine. That's good. So in that case, we'll move on to the main item meeting here. Okay, so we've got our looking at this. This time we're looking at reducing, reusing, and recycling of waste. So I'm just very pleased to be able to introduce our speakers tonight, who are going to get us through to the. Yes, so we've got our speakers here. So we've got our service officers this evening. We've got Mr. Rob McKenzie, Assistant Director of Street Services, and Ms. Katarina Pack, Waste and Street Services Manager. So we'll hear from their expert opinion on that. And also, we're very pleased to be able to welcome Emma Bill from the West London Waste Authority. I've dealt with the North London Waste Authority before, but I think it's great to be able to meet you this evening and to hear what you have to say. So I think in that case, without any further ado, maybe we should just move on then with the presentation if you're ready to cue. Oh, does it work? Oh, you got it.
Oh, hello, is that okay?
Yes, we can hear you, yes.
Thank you. So I'll just do a brief intro and then I'll hand across to Emma. Sorry. Okay, so Ealing Council is a waste collection authority, and as such, we have a statutory duty to collect waste and recycling from our residents and businesses on request throughout the borough. And we have a local authority trading company, Greener Ealing, that carry out the collections for us, and they're also responsible for the street cleansing, including the removal of fly tipping within the borough. So residents can recycle a wide range of materials from their home at the network of neighbourhood recycling sites or at the Household Reuse and Recycling Centre in Greenford. And Ealing performs well in terms of its recycling rate. We're consistently in the top 3 in London. Our year-to-date recycling performance, this is up to the end of December, we're just validating our sort of January to March figures, is 48.29%, an improvement from the year before. In comparison to slightly higher for the pandemic year and higher before that, but the composition of waste sort of changed during that pandemic period. So we're seeing that recovering now. So the council's waste disposal authority, West London Waste Authority, who you'll hear from a little bit later, is responsible for the processing and disposal contracts for most of the waste from Ealing's residents and businesses. So members of the panel and council officers enjoyed an informative visit to the MRF, lots of acronyms in waste, the Materials Recovery Facility, where Ealing's dry mixed recycling is sent for processing. So thank you for those that could make that. I had a really interesting day as well. So the process involves mechanical sorting, screening, the use of various technology, including infrared, magnets and eddy currents to separate the mixed materials into individual materials for onward sale and to be made into new products. So as part of the work that we do, we have regular and targeted communications to residents and businesses to ensure that material collected for recycling is of high quality. We carried out a doorstepping campaign recently across 7 of our lower performing rounds, encouraging participation in the food waste recycling service, alongside correct participation in the dry mixed recycling service. So making sure the right things are going in the blue bin and ending up being processed at the MRF. And food waste recycling continues to be rolled out to our flatted properties. So the council's reduction and recycling plan, which is a requirement of the London Environment Strategy, is awaiting member approval. That's going to Cabinet just slightly later in May. And that details that Ealing's already meeting the Mayor's minimum service level for collection of recyclable materials and a separate collection of food waste for curbside properties. There's ongoing work to engage with communities across waste reduction, reuse, and we're moving towards a sort of circular economy approach. And by that, we mean a system that keeps materials in use again and again through sharing or leasing, refurbishing, repairing, and recycling. So trying to reduce waste to a minimum. We're also involved in the innovative Pan-London food waste campaign. You may or may not have seen billboards and advertising boards with this message on. I don't know if anyone's seen any. I certainly have on my bus trip to here. So that's encouraging Londoners to shop, cook and eat better and be more sustainable. There's also plans to expand the business waste dry mixed recycling offer and to trial food waste collections from businesses. And we're also looking at more innovative ways to containerise waste for properties such as flats above shops, because we know that there are some issues there where we can't provide the current bins. So unfortunately, not all residents and businesses dispose of their waste in the appropriate way. So after education and engagement, there can be a requirement for enforcement. The team issue FPNs for fly tipping offences. Of those issued in 22-23, about 2/3 are for household rubbish and 1/3 for commercial waste. So we can help to target how we're going to approach that. And focus of the team includes ensuring that businesses know what they're required to do and that they must have a commercial waste collection and disposal contract. It's also important to ensure that new residents are aware of how they should be presenting their waste and recycling for collection, whether there's specific times as well. So the team works closely with residents, businesses, landlords, and managing and letting agents to ensure the information provided is correct. And I'm sure there's more that we can be doing on that as well. So I won't take questions now, but I will pass on to my colleague Emma. So just bear with me 1 second.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here today. So I'm from West London Waste Authority, and we're the Waste Disposal Authority. We're a statutory body, and you can see on the slide we represent all of the boroughs that are in green on the slide. Our expertise is collaboration and cooperation across the sub-region in order to create efficiencies. We're governed by 6 councillors, 1 from each borough, and we're funded by a levy. So that population across the whole area is 1.8 million people, and it's city-sized purchasing power. So it gives us, the 6 boroughs collectively, an opportunity to work together in some really good ways. Our focus predominantly is the materials and the infrastructure. So you can see in some of these pictures, there's our head office in the top left, and then the top middle is, that's a train being loaded with containers. That's at one of the 2 large rail link transfer stations in West London. And the train takes waste to energy recovery in the top right. The other infrastructure that we have is a recycling centre in Brent. We let a number of contracts, including the recycling contract that you visited. And the pictures in the bottom right, that's an anaerobic digestion facility. That's where the food waste goes. And it gets turned into gas, and that gas gets turned into energy. Some of the gas is put back into vehicles. And so the vehicles that come and collect the food waste are using that gas. So it's a really circular system. So we've been working on decarbonising waste for quite some time. And in this graph, you can see the dark blue lines at the bottom. This is the waste that was going to landfill. And we're now at less than 1% going to landfill. So energy from waste is the light green colour in the middle that replaced it. And at the top in yellow, that's the recycling and composting. So we've been really successful at decarbonising by getting waste out of landfill, but decarbonising the next phase, getting that waste, increasing the recycling, increasing reuse, and reducing waste altogether, requires us to work together a lot more, not just with you, but also with local groups, with local businesses, with local people, in order to make the changes that need to be made. So one of the things that we do is we measure the carbon in the waste. And what this chart is showing is how that is measured. So on the left-hand side, you can see the number of tonnes of a particular material type that's in the waste. So the largest component is food waste. There is another very large amount of composite and hard to recycle materials. And a lot of what you already have recycling services in place for is quite small by comparison. When you look at the bubbles on the right-hand side, that is the carbon dioxide equivalent measurement. So you can see it gives us a different measurement. So food waste is very important in terms of the amount of carbon, as is that composite and hard to recycle, because a lot of it will be plastic. But also really significant, you'll see in the middle is textiles. So although it's small in tonnage terms, in carbon terms, it's quite big. So looking at our consumption emissions in this way helps us to decide what projects we should be working on, what's the important things to target to try and get it out of the rubbish. So your climate emergency teams will be measuring carbon emissions according to the government standard. And when you look at that, waste appears to sort of sit along the zero on the axis. But when we overlay how we have measured the carbon emissions that's actually in the waste, you can see that it's a lot more significant, and it actually does have a place, and it's important that we get it out. So together, we've developed a framework to reduce waste by tackling food waste, textiles, plastic, and more reuse, to put a plan in place by 2030, and to do that using data, communications, and a big change in our skills as well. So these graphs show a different way of looking at recycling. You'll be used to recycling rates, which is a percentage. What we're doing here is we're measuring the kilos per household. So when you look at dry recycling, you can see that all the boroughs, so all of the different lines represent a different borough from West London Waste Authority. And you can see that they're following a similar pattern, because what is recycled depends on what is presented, what is shopped and put into the waste in the first place. With the food waste, for example, you can see that the projects have grown the amount of food waste, but as I showed you on a previous graph, there's still some way to go with increasing the amount of food waste that people recycle. So I'm just going to try and explain that. This graph here is showing you how much food waste there is. So the black bar at the bottom is the food waste that is left in the rubbish, and the green bar at the top is the food waste that's collected for recycling. And that gives a 21% capture rate. So there's an awful lot more to capture. We've put £3 million into all of our boroughs for projects to increase food waste recycling, to introduce a lot more access to food waste recycling, particularly from flats. And since doing that, and this is through the pandemic, what you see is the amount of food waste reduces, but the capture rate goes up. So as people recycle their food waste, they throw away less food. So it's great for their pocket. It's great for the council. It's great for the environment. And this is an important way to look at recycling so that we know how much we're capturing. We've been working on circular economy projects as well at the recycling centres, getting hold of valuable items before they're thrown away. Set up new systems, bulky waste collection system and booking systems as well. And it's given us some really valuable data. We could see a lot of furniture coming through. So we were able to rescue that furniture, get it to a social charity, and they were able to put it to good use and give people opportunities and jobs and sell it. Similarly with bicycles and e-waste, we've got a fixing factory. So there's an awful lot of good stuff that's happening in this area. And we were able to measure the social value of that furniture project. So for every pound that was spent, there was £4.39 created in social value. And this is by reducing isolation, giving people skills, improving mental health, giving them support into work and volunteering opportunities. And of course, the things that we do, that's our job, reducing the carbon emissions and reducing waste. So thank you very much for your time.
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor. Yes. Okay. Yes. Yes. So, thank you very much for that, Katerina and Emma. So that's very, very interesting to go through that. You did refer there to the site visit that we went on. And that was also a very interesting day that we did get to see how the different waste goes through the streams and how it all gets sorted out, and so the best use can be made of it. It was quite alarming though to hear that that a fair amount of our waste from Ealing does actually end up being rejected through being contaminated. So, I mean, that's something that we do need to work on. I mean, that's one thing that it's important to me in this meeting to ensure that we are getting everyone involved in recycling properly and allowing as many people as possible the opportunity to recycle properly. And they were talking about maybe finding better ways of sorting through our waste. There was like some ideas were out there about having lots of different bins so that people put particular types of waste in each different type of bin. Now, a lot of us will probably think that's not a particularly good idea. I'm not too sure if I'm particularly happy about that, but I was fascinated by the suggestion that they might use artificial intelligence to sort through our waste in the future. So that makes me wonder what we could end up doing in the future. So in that point, at that point, I'll invite others to ask questions, and also if anyone got any comments on the site visit, please do. I just ask Councillor Conti first and then Mr. Carter.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions. One on sort of leading on from that point about sort of sorting out waste. And I just wondered whether we've identified where the contaminations are more prominent. Are they in houses or in flats? Because I live in flats and we have one big dumpster bin for recycled waste and one for sort of general waste, and no one pays attention. It infuriates me every time I get down to the bin because I've sorted mine out and everyone just chucks in whatever one is not full. And I just wonder whether that's a similar case across the borough, because especially as more and more flats are being built, I can see that becoming an increasing problem. And I guess what steps potentially, in particular in flats, where it's not particularly practical to have multiple bins, how that could potentially be addressed. And my second question was, I've forgotten what my second question was, but it might come to me. I'll hopefully remember in a second.
Thank you, Councillor, and Mr. Carter. Oh, yeah, I'll go for it and then we'll get Mr. Carter.
It was just about soft plastics. And at the moment, I know that's not recyclable in the collections that we have. I just wonder what the plans are to make that potentially recyclable in the future.
Thanks. Shall I answer those now? Or
if you prefer to, otherwise we'll ask for another question. But... Okay, so if you want to answer that now, then go for it, please. Yes.
Thank you. So in terms of where the contamination is coming from, it's something that we look at with the crews initially. So we're actually taking a step back in terms of communication with residents first, to try and get everyone to put the right things in the right bin. We then have, for households and wheelie bins, we have contamination tags that the crew will use, and they will mark on their in-cab technology a particular property that may be contaminating, so we can follow that up. We would do that for repeat cases. We wouldn't necessarily do it on the first case, because that contamination tag would hopefully mean that they would have a look in their bin and take out that contamination or do the right thing next time. In terms of flats, again, resident communication, it can be tricky because obviously some residents may not understand or may contaminate the bin. Again, we have the information from the collection crews. They will tip flat waste when they come back to the depot, and we have that round information, and whether there's particular contamination coming out of a particular block of flats, for example. So we'll know that it's in a certain area, and then we can communicate either with residents or through landlords, managing agents. So we're doing that more regularly now.
I think there's someone got their microphone on who's joining virtually. Thank you.
I know, that's fine. Just checking I'm covering your points. And then, sorry, on the soft plastics, it's something that a lot of supermarkets do at the moment. They've got the sort of capacity to do that with the extended producer responsibility regulations that are coming shortly. there will be requirements for collecting those materials in the future, and there'll be support available for local authorities on that. I don't know if anyone has anything to add on that part or not.
Your timescale.
We don't know for sure, but there is a response to the consultation expected quite soon. So I would guess 2025 earliest, 2027 latest, somewhere around that.
Mr. Carter, please.
Well, the first thing to say is how much I appreciated the opportunity to go to Crayford. That was really eye-opening, and I kind of picked up so many new ideas about how all of this works, just from actually being able to kind of see the process in front of me. So thank you so much for organising that. One of the things that struck me particularly, which I guess is the kind of ongoing challenge for you, is the balance between how much you put the responsibility for recycling on the individual and how much you sort, the mass kind of centrally. And, that's where we got into some of those conversations about, how many individual bins, might you have. But that question of balance, I thought, was a very interesting one. And it left me with the question of how do you judge, what a good balance is, because it's presumably different for different situations. But one element of it seems to me that is important is making it as easy as possible for local residents to be able to recycle. So some of that's a function of education, some of it's infrastructure, I guess. But things like the local neighborhood recycling points, maybe those are things which need to be or could be expanded if we're finding particular problems with fly tipping or a lot of kind of mixed materials, implying that people are not really taking much care, or maybe don't have a ready access to be able to get rid of certain types of waste. And one thing that we don't have, or we don't readily have, for example, is a facility whereby domestic households who are clearing stuff out can readily make it available to the rest of the community. I mean, we do see people putting furniture out on the street, for example, but it's quite ad hoc. And there are certainly concerns about being accused of fly tipping and the like. But without that, there's a bit of a barrier to making stuff which could be used by other people available to them. So maybe some thoughts about how we can make the things which people might want to get rid of from their houses available to other people before they, rather than as a default having to send them to Greenford. And the other point, just kind of taking the thing about food waste, which was interesting. Part of my background is allotments, and I'm very aware that there are a number of allotment holders who collect food waste, not only from their own house but also from neighbourhoods, to put it through a hot composting process. And it seems to me that one way we can perhaps do more on food waste is actually to try and localize the collection and utilization of it, because then that produces a compost which can then be fed back into local growing. So there might be a virtuous circle that can be created there. Anyway, I had one specific question. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant, wasn't it? But I had one specific question, actually, because I couldn't see on the lines that you that you had on the charts there about recycling where Ealing fell in the charts. So it'd be interesting to know how Ealing compares to the other 6 boroughs, and whether you think that the gap between where Ealing is and the best performing in each of the categories is a realistic short-term ambition for us in terms of our improvement.
To say on that particular point, because those lines were looking at tonnages per household, which isn't really the measure that, if you're doing comparative stuff, that's not really going to work, because we're a very large borough. We're the largest of the 6, so we're always going to have more waste, or So I think the actual recycling percentages performance that we look at That's the comparator that we use to see how well we're doing in terms of recycling, the percentage. The tonnages they tell a story, and they're really useful information certainly for targeting materials. But as far as how well we're doing, I think Kat's probably got that in I think that's obviously in the cabinet report. I don't know if it's in the body of the scrutiny report, but that shows where we're doing comparatively, in West London and across London. As Kat said in her presentation, we are consistently in the top 3. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So on the actual lines, Ealing's not at the top, but one of the graphs I didn't show you is the lines on residual waste, what's left behind. And on that one, Ealing is very low down. So not being at the top isn't a bad thing, because there's not much being left behind. And that's why we measure it in that way, is to see what we're looking for is we're looking to track the changes over time. And with the change in law that's coming, extended producer responsibility and deposit return schemes, one of the things that's likely to happen to councils is that the amount of recycling is actually going to reduce. And so we want everyone to see that not as a bad thing, but as a positive. It's less waste, even though it's less recycling. And what we're checking for is how much is being left behind, what's being lost, and then how do we get good stuff out of that?
That can be a difficult one to sell, okay, because obviously as officers we're measured, and everyone looks at the borough's recycling performance, and everyone wants to see us up there. But as Emma said, we're in a different world now, and carbon is the issue. That's one thing. So to look at tonnages and what we do with certain waste streams is the key, and it's quite a difficult one to articulate broadly. So yeah, I'm happy to say that we're in the top 3 recyclers in London, because it sounds great, but that's not really what it's all about.
Any other questions right now? Sorry, I keep pressing the wrong button on this. Oh, Councillor Crawford, please. No, Councillor
Kate Crawford, East Acton Council, where we have an awful lot of HMOs, a big turnover of lets, and you can tell that by how the gardens look and how they do not recycle, and how you see loads of bins in front of the properties or whatever, just full of rubbish. What do you do any sort of partnership working with the private sector licensing team? I'd like to know if there's if there are conditions, and if there are conditions about landlords having to provide adequate, because these quite often bins, because quite often you can have 10 people individually living in one house. So yeah, I can understand why there are problems, and so it's when things fail, is there any way of going, not only doing enforcement, but actually working with the licensing team? And the other thing is, how can we improve on educating on this transient community, new people coming in all the time? Is it possible that with the licensing team, one of the conditions could be there's a letter with a well illustrated, a small poster that has to go in the hallway at each entrance. So I'd just be interested in seeing what work you're doing to improve the problem.
Thank you. So we do work with the private sector licensing team, and there are conditions in terms of provision of bins. We review on a case-by-case basis. So if something is brought to our attention, then we would look at the number of tenants that should be in the property, and then the bin provision. And if it's not adequate, we would review that and potentially provide additional or larger bins. Obviously, that's not always the case. Sometimes it's a case of actually they've got the right numbers of bins, but it's about using them correctly. So we have got leaflets available. We have got posters as well that we provided, but that's something that I think we need to sort of refresh that relationship, and perhaps we can provide those items either downloadable or in print for the team, so that when they're out and about, that they've got those readily accessible. And we're reviewing some of our leaflets at the moment, so we can do that with a sort of new round of information.
Can you come back in? Thank you, Councillor.
Any chance of doing something where you can actually stick it's almost weatherproof, but you can actually do a well illustrated tiny sort of poster and put it on the bins? So I see that I see some good work being done and around Ealing, but it's just reinforcing that information. If it was on every bin, people just might think, and obviously with perhaps more with illustrations, a good illustration rather than words. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, we can definitely look at that. When we introduced alternate weekly collections on every bin on the inside of the lid, so that it sort of was a little more weatherproof than outside, we did have a sign that was sort of yeses and nos. So that's something we could definitely do and work with, especially for HMOs. So I'll make a note of that. Thank you.
And Councillor Sissimos, please.
Thank you. I loved going to the recycling centre, as everybody knows. I had a really good time. I mean, it was interesting. So the only thing what happened to the bottles? We never saw any bottles being sorted. Did they get sorted? Do you know? They got sorted before.
Sorry, the glass bottles.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's sorted out it goes into road aggregate, the glass bottles, because it's mixed glass. So yeah, we didn't see that part.
No, we didn't see that, but we saw the big, separating and other things. And can you remind me what percentage gets rejected? How many, can we say in how many trucks get rejected up a month from Ealing?
In terms of number of loads, give me a second, but in terms of our overall contamination rate is running about between 11 and 13% overall.
Okay. And that is, according to the thing, it's textile and food waste.
Often, yes. So black bag waste, food waste, sort of sanitary waste, and textiles will be the main contaminants, yes.
So following on from that, so obviously textiles is a biggie. I guess you can put separate textiles, can you? I don't even know the answer to the question.
Yes, you can. So they will be collected separately to the blue bin if they're placed in a clear bag, either next to or on top. We also have a partnership with Trade, who are a textiles recycler, and they will collect your textiles. You can book an appointment with them. They'll also take small electrical items. That's something that we need to communicate, I think, a bit more widely. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is the clear bags, which is what people in flats use to put recycling, right? The amount of times people write is I'm fly tipping person. So everyone writes and says, this person's fly tipping, these people are fly tipping every week. And I'm thinking, no, it's just it's the recycling. But people don't know. And apart from the people that live in the flats don't know. But everybody else that lives on the street thinks it's just been dumped. Is there no way that we can have something on the bag saying this is recycling?
The clear bags that we provide, I believe, do say or household mixed recycling. We can have a look and see if we can make it clearer.
It's not really obvious, because I always get people writing to me about the same thing, and it is I have checked, and it is actually, I go and look, and it's actually the recycling.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'll make a note of that.
Oh, perfect. Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if we're in the mood for casework, then can I give you some as well? Look, a couple of things. Kind of what Councillor Crawford said, also now researching council, as you can imagine. So about the engagement with landlords, private landlords, and I wonder, and also actually with social landlords in terms of are there offers about tenant packs, when tenant packs go up and say what they need to do, perhaps, and do's and don'ts really, not, lots of things. And this one's a bit personal to me because I know the thing about the food waste bins, because in Bromyard House where I live, we did have the original ones, and I don't know what's going to happen to that, because that building is quite big, so we don't get. I've got the little green bin, but I can't put it anywhere in terms of the food waste at the moment. So I don't know where the rollout is on that. Generally speaking, and I want to talk about electrical waste because there was quite a large bubble, and so it's the company based in Warrington, isn't it? Waste Electrical something, because they're due to pick up some stuff from me on Monday. They're a bit late, but the only reason I knew about it, I think I saw a Twitter message from the council some time ago. And the reason I'm raising it here, not because it's about me, it's actually about people in flats often don't know where to go. They don't have cars a lot of the time they can't get to the depot. So maybe about promoting some of that. I'm getting rid of a tower PC, which I've not used in 12 years. It's just literally been sat on my floor. So maybe we could do some more stuff about that as well.
Yes, no, definitely, especially when the collections can be booked. Obviously, it's slightly easier for those in a house to leave out textiles, for example, with their blue bin. But obviously in a flat, if there's a booked collection and you know when to come out and you have a bag of textiles and a bag of electrical waste. We also need to have a look, I think, going back to Paul's point earlier, about the network of bring sites potentially, because there are electrical recycling banks in the borough at 13 or 14 sites, I think it is. But that's something that people may be able to do more locally. Small electrical items, yes, yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure we could fit a microwave in there. You'd probably a toaster size, yeah, hairdryer. But yes, then laptops, we're doing the reuse project with West London Waste Authority and the Fixing Factory. So laptops that are taken to Greenford are fixed and then returned back to those in need in the community, which is a great project.
So we can't quite hear the responses there, but I'm going to Councillor Conti, please.
Thank you. It was just sort of following on about the point about 10 to 12% of the waste that is sent to be recycled but can't be because of contamination. I just wonder, obviously we're very good and, rightly so, I guess, promoting the overall headline recycle rate of like 48-50%. And obviously residents probably think, oh, that's great, we're all doing a really good job. But actually if they then were to, and probably most people don't realise that actually 10% or 12% or whatever it is, doesn't end up actually being recycled. So I wonder if there is scope for, making that figure more widely known, because I think it may focus people's minds. I think most people who contaminate waste don't do it on purpose. They do it just because they think they're doing a good job and they do it inadvertently. So I think getting that message out there, I think probably would be an important thing to sort of refocus people's minds on what they're doing and how they go about their recycling.
Thank you. Yes, we've actually developing some social media campaigns and images around common contaminants. So we've not put a sort of figure on that, but we're talking about, please don't put nappies in your bin because it can contaminate a whole load, those sort of messages. So yeah, we can have a look at that as well.
Thanks. Mr. Carter, please.
So I think this is a really interesting theme, actually, of how we can just make it much easier for residents to be able to comply. Because I suspect some of it lies in education, but probably a lot of it is just people are very busy and dump material just because it's the easiest thing to do, so they can kind of get on with their lives. So the more that we can make it easy for people, but I do think there's mileage in not just taking materials, separated materials to a place in order that they can be collected and recycled, but also in somehow making certain materials available for the community generally to collect, to share around. So we have, there are various mechanisms online, marketplace and the like, by which people can electronically get in touch with things that are available. But we haven't really got much of a culture of making the things which we've got in our houses, which other people could use, available for people. And ultimately, that's a lot of the source of stuff which just gets tossed away and ultimately fly tipped, I guess, in many situations. So the more that we can connect residents to things which they can use, and I'm sure there must be a role for us in being able to facilitate that in some way. The more I think we start to tackle some of this residual stuff, which is then harming on some of our other statistics.
So what we're finding at all of the recycling centres is the more that we publicise things like the Fixing Factory, show people the bicycles being repaired with the workshop on site, take photos of the furniture as it arrives and say to them, we'll send it off. The more that we do that, the more that people are interested and the word spreads. And it's proving to be not just sort of beneficial in terms of our efforts, but it's really beneficial in getting the word out. People tweet about it. They post messages about it. So it will build. It'll build and it'll grow. There's funding difficulties for councils. Extended producer responsibility, which is only for packaging waste at the moment, is going to be an excellent model for bringing funding through the system so that we can really scale up these projects. So working on them together is proving really beneficial at understanding how it works, building the partnerships. But when the funding comes, then we should be able to scale up quite considerably.
So to come back in.
So yeah, no. So I think that that's excellent, and it's good to see that there's a demand and people kind of respond to the good stories which are kind of being shared, and that describes resident to council to final user, that kind of model. I think what I was trying to suggest was that there's probably a facilitation role for the council in resident to other resident. In relation to things, so they don't actually come into the pool in the first place. They just get kind of moved to places, and the more that we can facilitate that contact to happen, and that might be by having little neighborhood areas where people can leave stuff for other people to pick up and take, the sort of lending, like the library approach with books that you see in kind of in many shops and the like, but that applied to kind of a much wider set of things that people might be able to reuse. It just feels to me like that's potentially an area where we could do quite a lot for relatively little effort.
And everyone else would like to.
I was going to say that is actually part of the plan. So if we look at what our objectives are and our aspirations are, our circular economy is concerned, to localize a lot of this. So it's great having Greenfords, but ideally, you've got 7 towns centres in Ealing, so it'd be great if you had something in every part of the borough where people could exchange, people could get stuff repaired, etc., etc. I think that's all part of where we want to go, and that's something that Kat's going to sort out tomorrow, I think.
So, Councillor Ramo, please.
Thank you, Chair. Over the years, I think we have achieved a lot, in terms of recycling. But after hearing this, giving an item to the second time around or second life at the depot, particularly, for example, to bicycles and giving them refurbishing. What plans, what efforts we have made at earlier age in the schools level, our children? So have we made any program where we can have their trip to the recycling depot, where they can see that these little items, for example, the bicycle, which is very dear to them, some electronic goods, which is like laptop and stuff. So if we can encourage them to so they can witness that this thing which they are discarded can be given a second life. And in terms of sometimes, like, these some items are very expensive to buy, and maybe they can get it like, on the much lower price. So I think if we have any project and something, any plan in the pipeline, that'll be very, very useful. I'll be happy to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you. So we do engage with schools quite a lot. We've recently sent them information and resources, particularly around food waste. There was Food Waste Action Week in March. So we've had quite a lot of engagement with the schools coming back to us and asking us questions. We're trying to reinvigorate that service in schools, make sure they've got everything that they need for that service, because it was rolled out some time ago. And we're also about to run a competition with schools, and they will be able to design a poster or side of a vehicle, those sort of things, and perhaps get a visit from our recycling crews. In terms of visiting sites, they're often working sites, so can be tricky for children. Big shoes. All the PPE. So sometimes it is trickier for children, but there are a lot of videos and video resources available that we're making available and sharing with schools.
Yeah, just one more, and sorry, just another thing. What percentage of the electrical goods, we had any data been recycled in the last year? The percentage of electrical goods, particularly, because since now I can see that we are just about to witness some heat, the weather, and I can see like people in the last year, like after this hot weather, checking out their fans, particularly on the streets, you can see a lot. So what percentage of electrical goods we had last year, please? Thank you.
I would need to go back to our data just to clarify that. Sorry, I don't know that one off the top of my head, but we have that data available for recycling and for reuse as well, because some of those items are reused and some for recycling.
So the next round of questions, I'll first of all bring in Councillor Crawford, then Councillor Hamidi, then Councillor Zizimos, then I'll have some questions later. Thank you.
I was just wondering, particularly in Acton, we have an interesting market, and I think it's timely for us to rethink and get more out of upskilling people and having more interesting stalls. And what is being said here, Mr. Carter, Councillor Ahmed, it could be that if we talk to who runs Acton Market and works with, I don't know her name, but the lady who's doing some recycling, whatever. She's in Churchfield Road. I've forgotten her name. I can't. That could be her. I can't remember. But she's been given a shop. That I went to have a look at it. It's a great start, but initially, I thought they were going to be doing the electrical, repairing and watches and whatever, and they're not doing that. And I thought that was really, really sad, because otherwise you're just going to a certain sort of group, client group, whereas for that hub to be sending the message out, it needs to be doing well, and having those, could be a retired electrician, it could be someone who's left, college, doing, repairing lamps and things. So I'm wondering if we could explore like a day in a market, or an area in a market where kids, they come with their bikes and whatever, and have, and also work with, apprentices, with companies, see if a company would like to take on a stall, because the funding is an issue, but those stalls can be very cheap. I think the real problem to get that working will be transporting whatever people want to give, share. If it's big, then it's transport. But even that could, if someone really wants to participate, that we have, I'm sure we can get, volunteers, and we can get the gas paid, their petrol paid if they're not don't have, or electric, whatever paid. But I think that I'd love to see something much bigger, much more creative, with a group of people, a partnership on how we recycle and develop skills.
Thank you. We are working with there's a new circular economy manager, I think, at the Acton market, and a colleague of mine, I'll need to check sort of where discussions have got to, but there's contacts out there. We're having those sort of discussions. They're small, they're at the beginning at the moment, but we are connecting. And I think it's the Hive, is it, on Churchfield Road? There's another one. I think they're
Road, but I think there's somewhere the base. It's on the other side of the Uxbridge Road, and they're having an open day or an open morning. I think it's next week or the week after, which I plan to go to. But it's I'll have a chat with them as well.
Excellent, thank you. And we're also looking to run some repair workshops as well. So looking at the sort of 7 community areas, and we're liaising with housing colleagues at the moment about how we might facilitate that. But we've got some external people that are able to run those workshops for the community. So in repair, it's all early stages, but we can update you.
So Councillor Hamidi, please.
Hi, sorry, yeah. I have had my hand up for a while, so some colleagues have already raised some of the points and questions that I had. Now, I know that it was mentioned that officers are working at informing residents on how they should better recycle and things like that. Now, I know a lot of focus is being put on online, so on social media and platforms like that. The issue that I wanted to raise, one concern that I have, is that we have a lot of elderly residents who are not online. So they don't know social media, they're not on, emails or anything like that. And especially areas such as Southall, a lot of residents, the English is not their first language. So is the council or officers doing something to reach out to these residents and let them know about the proper ways of recycling, I guess, through other languages? So if there are Punjabi leaflets or similar things. Another point that I wanted to say, I know that budget is a big issue. So maybe considering speaking to faith groups would be beneficial, because they obviously have a lot of people that visit them. So getting them on board, and they will obviously speak to visitors there. And that can help, I guess, in a way. I know you've mentioned about schools, primary school kids, and the work that you're doing. I know groups such as Lagercan, they are doing a fantastic job, and they are speaking to school children, getting them involved. And I think it's important we focus a little more on that as well, because kids, they go home and speak to their parents, they will say what they've learned. And it's important that is another way of getting the message out. So I think this is some of the questions that I had. So thank you.
Thank you for those. So we do have leaflets available. Obviously, we would send those out on request, I suppose, rather than a borough-wide distribution. We have the Around Ely magazine that we, in every issue of that, we make sure we get something in about waste and recycling, whether it's recycling right or garden waste or fly tipping or one of our messages we make sure we get in every issue of that. We have in the past had leaflets in other languages, so it's something that if there's a community need that we can look at. Again, yeah, with faith groups and community groups, we're more than happy to engage with and have done in the past, but it's definitely something we can do more of. Schools, again, as noted earlier, we're working with schools and we work with Lagercan as well and support them in their volunteering and litter picking.
Councillor Ziznos, please.
I was going to say, COVID's over now. Why do we still need to book to go to Brentford Recycling Centre?
I think it was the booking system obviously was brought in during COVID for health and safety reasons. But what it has proven is that it's actually improved site efficiency. It's reduced the amount of illegal waste getting through the system, made it trade waste, yeah, getting through. The feedback that we get is overwhelmingly positive. I think initially there is the odd person who would love to just rock up and tip something at a site when they want, and yeah, it's a bit of a pain. It's a pain for me. I'm an Ealing resident. And yeah, a little bit awkward, but I got over it pretty quickly. And most people, the feedback that we get is that this is a positive thing. It enables them to plan, that's one thing, but importantly for everyone else, it makes the site safer, it manages the waste better, and it's just more efficient.
Thank you. I just have some questions first of all to Charles before I call anyone else in. So actually, that you can hear from this thing, it's not too nearby. But so first of all, to follow on from there, it just would be nice to clarify about the plans that are afoot in order to, without coining a phrase, in order to make sure that our centre is accessible to people who are on foot or on cycle, because it's something that before COVID, I could actually go to the recycling centre with a bag full of items I needed to get rid of or needed to recycle or whatever. And then maybe I could just use my bags to then do the shopping on the way home and it was all sorted. But that's something that I can't do right now. And it is a problem at home because I do understand how it's like for myself in a flat, that I will end up with stuff in the flat and I've got nowhere to put it. I can't take it to the dump until my sister comes to help from Milton Keynes and comes to pick it up. So that could be a problem for me. And I know that's been a problem for other people too. And it does cost money if I do want to leave it outside for the council to pick up. But I'm hoping that we are making progress towards getting somewhere with that. And following on from that as well, this actually is interesting because I was looking through the reduction and recycling plan, and there was one point about reusable nappies, which I found quite interesting. The fact that it's something that we need to encourage parents to use reusable nappies in the way that maybe they did when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s. But then looking at that, I was but then started to think about, well, what else can we really learn from the older generations and what they did were better than what we're doing now in terms of recycling. Because sometimes we get this idea that young people are the ones who really are leading the way when it comes to being eco-friendly, when it comes to recycling. But then I was looking into all the various studies into this, and there's a 2020 study that says that the over 55s are more likely to recycle waste than any other age group. 84% of them are more likely to be recycling waste. And another study said that 1 in 5 25 to 34-year-olds found recycling to be too time consuming and didn't really understand the labelling on the packaging. So why is this? Why is it that the older people are doing so much better? Why can't we get the older people to actually teach the younger people some lessons? And is some of this to do with the fact that older people might be maybe in more settled housing they've got their own place, and maybe the younger people are more transient, are more likely to be sharing, are finding it actually quite difficult to work together with their housemates in order to get the recycling done? So these are kind of questions that I'd like to raise. And also going back to nappies, if we are going to have reusable nappies, those of us who are in flats will find it very difficult to dry lots of nappies inside our flat. So what can we do in order to make sure that there are laundrettes that it can support parents, and also, you know, when it comes to tumble drying, and is it okay for us to actually put our nappies on the balcony? Because sometimes people don't like you putting washing out on the balcony, but maybe we're going to have to allow that so that people can use reusable nappies. So I put a lot of points in there, but hopefully we can sum some of that up in some way around basically getting the kind of the young, the transient, people who are renting, people in flats, just help them to get on board with it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I do think the older generation, my parents included, are more thrifty. More thrifty than the younger generation. That's as much as I'm going to say on that. But no, I think we definitely can learn things, because yeah, the reusable nappies, you know, my parents don't throw things out, they fix things, and the same with all their friends in their local area. So we can tap into that. We need to try and tap into that. The reusable nappies, I think we work with West London Waste Authority on that in terms of subsidising, or I think we have some trial kits available. So again, something that we can promote a bit more. I think post-COVID, there's a few things that we can, you know, bring back to the forefront. In terms of drying nappies on balconies, I would have to find that one out. But I think the environmental studies around real nappies or reusable nappies versus disposables, so even if they're washed and dried using a tumble dryer, I don't know exactly what spec they have to be, but I think it still shows that it's more environmentally friendly to use the reusable nappies rather than the many disposables that you would have.
Yeah, Bill, thank you.
Thank you. The thing that my parents did that isn't fashionable anymore is home composting, and in particular food waste, and just little food waste caddies on the countertop. And one of the things that I showed, the reason I showed you the waste composition is because 30% of your rubbish is food waste. And so to really increase recycling rates, that's the place to look. The other recyclables are very small, but you're capturing most of it. So for you know, if ward councillors are able to really promote food waste recycling in their areas, you'll see a big increase in your recycling, and the systems are set up. So that would be a sort of a thing that I would encourage, just to sort of bring your comment and lots of the other comments about increasing recycling together.
Well, maybe just ask about the using the recycling centre by foot. What might be happening on that? Yes.
I think Kat's team have been working on this for a few months now, and we're kind of there. We've just got a hurdle to get over with our internal health and safety team. It's quite strange because, you know, you were using that site on foot before the pandemic, and you shouldn't have been, really. I think it really wasn't that safe. I mean, hands up here. Had that been properly scrutinised, and had it been monitored, and had our health and safety people looked at what people were doing on a daily basis, basically walking through it onto an operational site with vehicles whizzing around all over the place, I think they would have said you shouldn't do it. So, you know, people have been doing it before the pandemic, but fortunately, we put a stop to that. And so when it does become accessible for pedestrians in the future, that will be in the right way, so that it is absolutely safe enough to do so.
Okay, so I've got Councillor Konzai, then Councillor Ahmed, then Councillor Zizimos, please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know what the panel thinks, but I just wanted to ask a question about waste which has been left deliberately or ignorantly, and the links between that and, say, like fires, because I live in an area where a few years ago there was a lot of fly tipping and people were making all sorts of barbecues and everything, and there was a serious fire that nearly caught our, houses alight, and the fire brigade had to attend. Hitesh, you remember that? And then I think about the heat we had last year that caused all kinds of problems around the UK. I just want to know if we were to have a similar thing in Ealing, as what measures are in place to ensure that, things don't get out of control. So that I'm looking at the link between waste and extreme heat, whether it's to do with the perpetrator being the resident, but through ignorance or deliberate, or environmental, ecological reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay.
Right, obviously, any waste that's put out in the environment that isn't authorised is illegal. That's one thing. Preventing people from doing it on a daily basis is a massive challenge. We have limited resources, limited enforcement resources, but we do pretty well across the borough. But there is a fly tipping problem that we're all familiar with in all parts of the borough. So stopping that, will we ever stop it? Probably not completely, but we do have an external enforcement contractor who provide up to 6 officers a day and a special fly tip investigation team on a daily basis that looks at hotspots. So we know where the hotspots are. Whether we're successful in preventing people from fly tipping at these hotspots, in some cases, yes, some cases, no. You know what it's like with fly tipping? You have to find the evidence to see who's put it there, or you need CCTV that can actually identify an individual. But then again, that just shows a picture of somebody's face, and you just have to know who that is. You don't know where they come from. So we do put a heck of a lot of effort into this. And fly tipping, the removal of fly tipping costs us probably about £350,000 a year just on fly tip removal. And that doesn't include the disposal cost. So it's costly and it's an environmental blight. And yeah, there are clear hazards involved if you take into account the potential for, fire risk, etc., etc., etc. But all we can do is target our resources as best we can based on intelligence. So yeah, it's this is a daily battle, unfortunately, and we continue. What we do have, and I don't know if this probably hasn't been shared, but our enforcement manager produces a bi-monthly bulletin now, which shows all of the enforcement activity in all parts of the borough. So the amount of fly tipping that's been investigated, the amount of fixed penalty notices that have been issued, etc., and the number of prosecutions that have been in relation to fly tipping. So that's something perhaps that could be shared a bit more widely. I think members should have all seen that. So not seen anything? Okay. All right, I'll just check that when I get back, but you should have all seen that.
Can I just quickly ask, I take all your points. Yeah. I'm also in relation to like the heat, when we have extreme heat, that we're not just reacting to events. What infrastructure has been put in place to ensure that we're dealing with, because we're aware of, things are changing. So we could have a situation. I know Grove Farm, when we were there last year on a visit, apparently there was a fire there, which I don't know if I think it was caused by extreme heat, I think. But it's that kind of question I want to get more of an answer to as well.
Yeah, and I think that's entirely valid. I think where we can actually do something is in relation to our housing stock. I think the general sort of houses and general environment's a bit more tricky, but certainly as far as the Ealing housing stock's concerned, we can put in measures, and I'm sure my colleagues are. I'd have to have a word, but as far as prevention is concerned and prevention of fire risk surveys are done regularly, and in view of the heat last summer, I would imagine and expect that has been upped, and that there are measures in place to ensure that that risk is minimised.
Thank you. So Councillor Ahmed, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really thankful to the officers. I think it's very detailed explanation, but I just would like to again revisit my question. we do have the information and encouraging the youngsters, to food recycling. But I'm not sure still that, what the council's, waste management efforts to giving the information to in the schools that where they can buy recycled items, i.e. particularly bikes and the laptops. That's the first thing. And then secondly, in my constituency, I have some people, come forward. So if there's somebody showing their interest, they are interested into giving the second life to the electronic and electric goods. Is there any point of contact they can contact and how they can approach? Thank you.
Thank you. So just in terms of the bikes and laptops, the bikes, actually, we're working with Let's Go Southall and Let's Ride Southall. So a lot of the bikes that come into Greenford and some that have come into Abbey Road are being repaired and refurbished by them and given out in the community there. So you can't necessarily go and buy them, but we could make residents in that area more aware of those community groups that are already there and that may be able to then issue bikes. And again, the laptops, I think I'm not entirely sure how they do go back into the community, but I can check that. In terms of a point of contact for electrical items, it's something that we'd have to look into. We'd need appropriate places to store them and make sure we could repair them. And we're working with West London Waste Authority on reuse in general across the region, and that's something that we can take into consideration.
Sorry, Chair, just quickly, it's not a question, it's just a suggestion. I know over the years that we have the project, to giving awareness to active living, like, in the community, like, do we have any project where we can say, where we can have actively looking for the recycling the item rather than checking them out? So, like a recycling community shop or something, high street, where we can people like, passerby, they can be encouraged, rather than checking them out. Thank you.
Well, certainly as to the recommendations, which we'll be discussing after the Q&A. So that's excellent. So thank you. So Councillor Zippos, please.
Obviously, we're just talking about households here, but what happens to commercial waste, like from restaurants, food waste? What happens to it?
So at the moment, businesses can choose to sign up to our business waste collections, which at the moment is residual waste and dry mixed recycling in bags. We don't currently have a food waste collection service, and we're looking to trial that. And we're also looking to expand the dry mixed recycling offer so that the businesses can use bins as well. We've been surveying the current customers, and we're looking at the feasibility of that now. Businesses can obviously have a private contractor that can collect food waste, or some collect like used cooking oil as well. So those services are available, but it's a service particularly around the food waste and expanding the dry mix recycling that we want to offer our business customers.
Okay, Councillor Taylor, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'm sort of need to go back to my question that I don't think was answered earlier on. Just on the waste electric, because I'm feeling slightly guilty now about ringing up somebody in Warrington, because there seems to be an alternative process here. The reason I said Warrington only because it was on our council's link. they come down, and so are there better alternatives to I don't know, repair it or something, because they are laptops, and because obviously the fear that we all have is clearing the data first before you hand it over to somebody, of course, before it happens. But the second thing is, and I don't take this the wrong way, Emma, but it's because as a is it Emma? I can't.
Katharina.
No, Emma. Sorry. Not as criticism, but you mentioned about councillors, promoting issues about food waste. It's just my question earlier on is that I live in a block of flats. I can't do that food waste. So it's not that I don't want to promote it. I can. I just feel like a bit of a hypocrite that I can't actually do it myself. Hence, my question was, what's the rollout of those food waste bins in blocks of flats?
So a couple of things there. And Emma reminded me that we do have a repair directory online, which residents can have a look at. And there will be lots of different businesses on there. So yes, please have a look if there's an item that you'd like to repair. In terms of the food waste recycling, we are 29% of the way through our rollout for flats. I can see where Bromyard House is on the list, and others, of course. But no, we're working our way through that. Sorry, what was your other? Was there one more I've missed? Yeah.
So, Councillor Mohan, then, please.
It's a quick one. Earl mentioned about fly tipping. I must say that our approach in terms of dealing with fly tipping is really good, and it is cleared as soon as we report it. So very, very good there. I just want to find out if there is any collective approach of the various councils in terms of dealing with fly tipping.
What we do is we do share intelligence, but that's only in relation to major fly tipping, because it is a criminal offence, and there are organised gangs that carry out fly tipping across West London. So we do work with our colleagues across border quite regularly, but that's only on the major stuff. The stuff that you see, the odd bag that someone dumps around the corner and all of that sort of stuff, you know, boroughs are all dealing with the same issues. It's why do people do it? And when you get to the why, then you can perhaps do something about it. If it's a storage problem, you can perhaps help somebody with storage. If it's because they just don't know, because most people just don't know they're fly tipping, to be honest. And that's what all the surveys have found. Mm-hmm. And because you have a transient population in many of the hotspot areas, getting that message across consistently is a challenge. But it's, you know, we all have the same issues across West London, and we're all kind of doing the same thing.
Councillor Crawford, please.
I just wanted to flag something up. It's not really a question, but it follows on from what Councillor Mohan said. I really want to pay tribute to the responsiveness of your team. I know you've come out this in East Acton and North Acton, often the same residents, but you are open. You're committed to engaging with residents, and that really helps us. And I'd also like to say how responsive the envirocrime officers are. They'll happily, you know, arrange to, you know, spend a morning or even a day. I think a morning is enough with me walking around the fly tipping hotspots. But, you know, it really helps us as councillors. I mean, I don't like to see myself as, you know, a monitor. There are some councillors that do it. There are some councillors who aren't, you know, don't do what I do, and I don't think, and I think they're right not to do it sometimes. But it really does help, because it then helps me to respond to the residents, say, we've done this, we've done that. And an important part, the important role that you have is to reporting it. And just so big thank you. It really helps us. And just finally, a lot of the residents complain that they can't get, they don't get a response, any action, a follow-up action when they reported something on Love Clean Streets. Now, officers have been very good. They you know, I've asked them, did you get that? You know, how often have they reported something? And usually, they can say, you know, they can respond and saying, oh, yes, several times, or one was they reported something bad, you know, inappropriately. But but there was an issue. I think there's an issue called white space. I have no idea what that is, but has the issues with the white space been sorted out? That was last year. And are you monitoring the responsiveness and Love Clean Street?
So white space is the contractors system where they hold all their data. So that will have all the round data in it, all the jobs that get inputted by residents via the forms on the council website will go, if it's appropriate for Greener Ealing, they'll go through to Greener Ealing on white space. So that's a really, that's all their information is in there. I will need to double check on that technicality side of it. As far as I'm aware, there aren't issues at the moment with the integration. I know there was an issue last year. But yeah, as far as I know, if things are reported and they go straight through and then they can be closed off and there's that feedback loop in there.
Mr. Carter, please.
Just a couple of quick points. So just following on from what Emma was saying earlier about food waste and the old practice of putting that into household compost. I mean, that's just like an obvious and very easy thing. There's a technical variant on that, which is hot composting, which allows you to, so in other words, composting under heat, which allows you then to absorb meat, animal bones, things that you wouldn't normally think of as compostable materials. But it's very easy and practical to learn the techniques that, and the more that can be kind of shared out within the borough, the more of this sort of material can be put to good use, actually, for growing. But the other thing I wanted to mention, because it's been a feature of each of the sessions that we've had here, has been the connectivity between the subject matter and volunteer groups. And what we've kind of seen in other areas is that, our success as a community depends to quite some degree on the way in which volunteer groups are stepping up and helping to expand our capacity to be able to do things. So the question I've got really is do we feel like we're engaged enough with volunteer groups? And are there any spaces where we might try and encourage new volunteer groups to step in and perhaps help with taking some of the responsibility, some of the burden in relation to the work that we're doing?
I would say that we're definitely not doing enough. It's a bit of a chicken and egg, really, because it's the capacity to support volunteer groups properly is what we need. So, it can't be something that you put in place and then walk away. So, I mean, we do have plans. I mean, I've got an objective, a personal objective set for me to increase the number of volunteer groups that my services work with. I mean, I haven't achieved that anywhere near it this year because of capacity issues, but certainly that's something that we do need to build on. I mean, we're doing well with Largican, they're great, but everyone knows Largican, and I'm sure there are loads more who can be supportive. So yeah, that's something we are looking at.
Thank you. So I think we might start looking at some of the recommendations. And so, I mean, one point I did have, it could be like a part recommendation, a part question, was that I was very interested to read on the presentation there about Eat Like a Londoner. I didn't really know very much about it. And I'm actually part of the kind of volunteering, part of the kind of partnerships and co-working. I mean, something that I started thinking about was that on Monday, of course, we had this fantastic coronation weekend. And so I went to a street party and then had the chance to sample some Chinese dumplings. I started talking about how when I went to China, I went to someone's flat and learning to make dumplings with them. And someone else said, well, it'd be fantastic if we had a chance to teach each other cooking skills and getting together and doing that. So I wonder if how much of that we can do in terms of getting the community together, learning new skills, having that kind of reaching out and getting to know more people, and can we actually integrate into what's going on with Eat Like a Londoner, because it is something that I must admit I don't really know very much about, and how much do you think it might suit making it into a far bigger, more holistic approach to how we work in the community.
It's definitely something we can look at, because it is about encouraging people to cook and cook more sustainably, and actually teaching each other those skills and using products that are available now rather than ones that are shipped in. So ones that are growing right now and things like that. So yeah, definitely have a look. it's, yeah, hopefully if we can engage with those communities as well, that would be really positive. Yeah.
That's good. So, because then I think when it comes to recommendations, we probably do what we've done before, is that if we've got plenty of ideas, I'll try and put that together and work with Councillor Susan Moss, and we'll come up with some recommendations that we can put forward, and hopefully people will be in agreement with that. But I don't know if there's anything that you want us to add to the list of things to consider when drafting the recommendations. If there's anything else that anyone wants to say at this stage from what we've already discussed, because I know Councillor Ahmed, for example, talked about looking at the active travel side and what we can do to show some partnership there as well. I mean, there's obviously one thought that came to my mind is to talk about the commercial waste. Is there more that we could do? It looks at our food safety side. Can they do more to perhaps to intervene and talk to restaurants on how they can deal with their food waste in order to prevent vermin, for example? I mean, there might be lots of bits of partnership working we can look into, and of course the volunteer groups as well. And you talk about, like, the Councillor Crawford talks about the market and what we can do there. So we can, there's a number of matters. So any other? Oh, thank you, Mr. Carter.
Just to develop the point about volunteers, because I think that for me that feels thematic, you know, through the 4 sessions that we've had. And I think the point that you made about we'd like volunteers, but how do we make the space to be able to support them is a feature of each of the conversations that we've had. Actually, you know, we recognize that volunteers can make a big contribution, but we're working flat out as it is, and so we don't have the capability to be able to bring volunteers in an effective and sustainable way. So I think it's worth investing, not specifically for this piece, but more generally in that question for the council of how can we get a more volunteer oriented approach to the things that we want to do. So in making active citizenship real, if you like. And the solution to that might lie in actually investing a little bit in some centralized volunteer group that can take the responsibility, that can interface with groups like the team here and work on those relationships and help the volunteer groups to be able to operate effectively without being a big drag on the in-house teams. So I don't exactly know what the solution is there, but I think there's a lot of mileage in being able to just try and make ourselves more volunteer focused in terms of how we organise ourselves.
I did have Councillor Hamidi and then Councillor Ahmed, please.
Thank you, Chair. One recommendation that I have is, I believe it was back in 2018 or maybe 2017, where we used to get monthly newsletters where it said how many FPNs were issued, how many fly tippings, and what the officers have done. Because before that, you know, a lot of residents, they were complaining, oh, the council is not doing enough. And it was simply because they just didn't know what the officers were doing. And I think it's important that we need to recognize how hard officers are working. And by going back to issuing this sort of newsletter, it's just letting residents know that this is what's happening, this is how many issues we've had, and how many FPNs we've issued and things like that. I think that would be very beneficial, and it could wake people up that, you know, there is an issue and the council are doing what they can.
That's actually make a lot of sense, because then people don't feel like, oh, there's no point because nobody's pulling their weight. So it means that everyone just realizes there is actually a value to doing your bit and to actually getting rid of your recycling properly.
I think that was only, if I'm not mistaken, it was only in Southall Broadway and Southall Green that there was a scheme where there was a lot of fly tipping at the time, and the council came up with this initiative to do this. So it was just run for a little while, and it was very positive. The feedback that we got from residents was very positive. So yeah.
Right, thank you. Yes, yeah. So yeah, okay, I'm bringing Mr. Mackenzie on that.
Just so as not to make that recommendation, so that we don't actually have that in place already.
Right.
I did mention earlier, I don't know, it may have in translation somewhere, but we do have the newsletter that details all the level of fly tipping ward by ward, enforcement activity ward by ward, fixed penalty notices ward by ward, prosecutions ward by ward in relation to fly tipping. So that is there. The last one was produced in February. As I said, I'm surprised that members haven't seen it. I'll check back with the service manager, make sure she gets that out again. But there's another one due out in a couple of weeks. So and it does contain all that information. So you can see exactly what the team's doing, how successful it is, and what challenges remain.
Well, that's the problem. Maybe it's a case of it's not really getting out there and being seen. Actually, just one thing that comes to my mind is that now we're looking at town forums as something to look at for the future. Maybe that's something that really could be integrated into that as well to ensure that everyone within our towns, because that's one thing that I know where I am in Northolt, is that there was one point at which people didn't feel like anything was being done about putting FPNs out, but then we really pushed for the matter, and I managed to come up with some figures, tell my residents, okay, we've done this, we've improved this amount, and it made people feel a lot better. So it is getting the information out there. And was it Councillor Ahmed? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Without taking enough time, this is such an interesting topic and subject. And I'm just adding up Mr. Carter's, what he made a very good point. But one thing which I would like to really see it, incentive, how we can encourage and give the incentive to the people so people can have more kind of, like our, future mayor to be perhaps is visiting to the, various places where this can be promoted, some kind of competition, incentive people. So we can say champion of the recycle of the year or something, So this kind of recommendation, I think, needed to be. It's such an interesting topic. We can go another 2 hours, I think. Such an interesting thing, because we do want, especially like we have seen over the years now, the cost of the item purchasing is getting very high now. It's very expensive, something which was £10, £25, right? So something if encouraged that you get incentive, you'll be getting kind of brownie points from the authority and officers are there and recycling, and we can give second life to the thing. So perhaps this is something for our mayor to be. Thank you, Chair.
And since we have our future mayor here, most likely our future mayor.
Yeah, I think that the future mayor has some other ideas, in fairness to that person. But no, there was actually something, it did spring to mind, because I don't want to name the name of the shop because it's rude when I say it, but it's an electrical shop, recycling one. It's got 3 letters, CEX, which I can't say. No, and it's interesting. The reason I say that is just I've taken stuff back there recently, and one of them was an old phone. They gave me about 30 quid for it, to the point where it was an Android, and it was upgradable to Android 9 or something, and the current version is about Android 13 latest phones, and they will sell it for 70 quid. I was like, why would anyone buy a phone at that price when you get a new one with the latest software, And so there clearly is something in the recycling of electrical waste in that sense, because there is a market. I wouldn't buy a phone I consider to be obsolete almost, but clearly there is, because people are quite desperate, is what they said, the reason for that. So there is stuff in there, but I'm not committing to the mayor. Sorry.
Giving the some kind of a certification, mayor, so that there'll be like incentive. Doesn't have to be financial. Some kind of like photo sessions at the special mayor's parlors for those people who are champion recycling. Just thoughts.
Once we get our voluntary groups all sorted out and going, then we can no doubt they can ask to go to the mayor's parlour or invite the mayor to one of their events, and maybe he might hand something over. We'll see.
Thank you, Jane.
Okay. Okay, so I think then we've got a good few ideas there. I think that's kind of the discussion that we wanted to have. So we'll move on to the next part. Hopefully we'll have a chance to look at the draft final report. Has anyone got any comments they want to make on that then, please? In that case, if we're going to let them go, it might be best to actually thank them again. So thank you so much for coming along this evening, and also Emma, what I might do is I might get in touch with you just to get some advice, because I do actually have to this summer potentially set up a workshop at work on the matter of recycling, and so I'd rather have someone like yourself or someone you can recommend in order to ensure I do it properly. So I'll be in touch, and thank you to all of you. Yeah. So any comments on the draft final report? In that case, if no one had anything they wanted to add there, I think what will happen then is that we'll look at completing that report with the information that we've learned from this evening. And also I'll put together the introduction as well and put together those further recommendations. And so hopefully we'll have the consent of the panel when it comes to when it comes to actually agreeing that final report, that once myself and the vice chair have looked at what we need to add to that. So will we have the agreement on that? To do, we agree on what the draft final report as it stands, and then we'll add to it as necessary. And we'll obviously hopefully get a chance to see what we've put together as recommendations. Thank you, Mr. Carter. Yes.
Just a practical point, really. I mean, there's a lot of recommendations in there. Do we want to do anything in terms of prioritizing them, saying, you know, these are our, putting them in some kind of ranked order so that if there is some action which then is precipitated by the report, that, you know, it's kind of clear what our top 2 or 3 points are?
I think what will normally happen is that the officers would get a chance to have a look at those recommendations, and also at the cabinet level as well, it'd be looked at, and then they can maybe have a look and they could and let us know what they think is actually feasible, what maybe has been being done already, and what is likely to be done. So I think that they might be probably more taking the lead on that. But I understand the point, so maybe it's something I do need to bear in mind when it comes to perhaps telling people, can you look at this bit first? Thank you. Nothing else to be on that one. So if we do have the agreement then to go forward on that, so I think that probably brings to the end that part of the meeting. And so, right, was there another point to talk about, Councillor Taylor? Sorry. Yeah, yes. So that'd be the last item. So, okay, did you have anything to add to it?
I'll just say, sorry, I was looking for if there's any other business we don't normally have. I just want to say thank you, Chair, for your chairing of the meeting this year, actually. So, just put that on record.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that, everybody. And that does mean that as well as thanking the officers tonight, I would like to thank all the officers who have joined us and contributed so brilliantly during the year. And that includes most definitely Harjiet here, Anna Marie and Keith, who isn't here tonight, but they've all just been fantastic and we couldn't really have done anything without them. And of course, the person who I really couldn't have done it without is Councillor Susan Moss. And so thank you very much for being such an excellent and supportive Vice Chair. Right then, so in that case, that brings to the end one more year, and hopefully we'll have our report soon to be proud of as a record of all we've achieved.